Hey guys, tonight we wander through the corridors of time to understand a heavy burden called wealth, tracing how a simple tool became a master of the human spirit. Imagine yourself sitting in a dim-lit chamber, surrounded by the clinking sounds of ancient coins and the rustle of old ledgers, feeling the weight of history pressing against your velvet robes. You might find yourself lost in the glint of gold or the chill of silver, but don't worry. You probably won't survive this much contemplation without falling into a deep slumber. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Please tell us where in the world you're listening from, and what time it is in your corner of the globe. You sit there in the quiet darkness, the air around you smelling faintly of old parchment and beeswax candles, as you contemplate the very nature of value itself. It is a heavy thought to hold, much like a heavy coin pressed into the palm of an ancient merchant or a king's advisor in a crumbling dynasty. You think about how humans have always chased after something tangible to represent their survival, their status, to give them a sense of permanence in an ephemeral world. This pursuit has been a constant thread through the tapestry of our existence, weaving through every war fought and every city built since the dawn of time. In this quiet moment, you realize that your own relationship with wealth is not just about the coins in your pocket, but about the history we carry within us. You feel the phantom weight of gold as if it were a physical presence, a ghost of the treasures once sought by explorers and conquerors alike. It is easy to imagine the greed of old, the desperate hunger for more than one could ever use. Yet here you are, simply breathing in the stillness. The history of money is not just a history of economics. It is the history of human desire, shaped into something we can hold, trade, and lose. You ponder the ancient marketplaces where nothing was worth more than the grain or the goat. Before the concept of value became an abstract idea, there was a time when wealth was as real as the earth beneath your feet, a flock of sheep, a field of wheat, a sturdy ox to pull the plow. But even then, there was a tension between having enough and wanting more, a quiet struggle that has persisted through every era. You imagine yourself walking those dusty paths, feeling the warmth of the sun and the texture of the trade, realizing how far we have traveled from that simple reality. The concept of money began as a way to bridge the gap between two souls meeting in an exchange, a common language spoken in metal or grain. It was meant to be a tool, a means to facilitate life's necessities, yet it slowly transformed into something much larger than its original purpose. You can almost hear the clink of coins from 1,000 years ago, echoing through the halls of your mind like a rhythmic heartbeat. It is a sound that has driven men to madness and inspired the greatest architectural marvels to rise toward the heavens. As you settle deeper into your blankets, you imagine the great empires where gold was the lifeblood of the state, flowing through veins of trade routes to fuel war and peace. The kings and queens knew that without their coffers, their crowns would be nothing more than hollow trinkets of polished metal. You think about how the weight of a kingdom's wealth could build monuments that lasted millennia, yet it was also the very thing that could cause a civilization to collapse from within. It is a delicate balance, much like the balance you feel now as you drift toward sleep. You reflect on the idea that money was once something we could touch and trust, a physical manifestation of our labor and our luck. There was a certainty in the weight of a gold talent or a silver drachma, a tangible reality that anchored us to the earth. But as time marched forward, the nature of that value began to shift, becoming more abstract and harder to grasp with human hands. You wonder if we have lost something vital in our journey from the heavy coin to the invisible digit, or if we have gained a freedom we never knew was possible. The history is unfolding before you like a slow-moving river, winding through valleys of prosperity and over mountains of debt. It is a quiet, steady movement that does not rush, much like your own breathing as you prepare to dream. You are a witness to the passage of time, observing how the hunger for wealth has shaped the very landscape of our world. Every coin ever minted carries with it the story of the hands that held it, the people who worked to earn it, and the civilizations that rose and fell because of its presence. As you listen, you realize that we have often mistaken the tool for the master, forgetting that money was meant to serve us, not the other way around. In the olden days, a person might have been content with enough to eat and enough to keep warm. Yet even then, there were those who sought more than their fair share. This human impulse is an ancient ghost, always whispering in our ears about the glory of accumulation and the prestige of excess. You feel the quiet wisdom of the ancients as they grappled with these same questions under the stars long ago. The stories of the past are not just dates and names. They are the echoes of human breath and the pulse of human ambition. When you think about the merchant on a dusty road or the sailor on a vast sea, you realize they were all chasing the same thing, a sense of security through wealth. Yet, that security was often as fleeting as the morning mist over a river, vanishing with the change of seasons or the fall of an empire. You are learning to see the patterns in the chaos, finding the rhythm in the rise and fall of fortunes. You find yourself wondering about the true cost of all this metal and paper, the invisible price paid by those who lived before us. The wars fought over gold mines and the trade routes carved through treacherous lands were often driven by a hunger that could never be sated. It is a heavy thought, but you let it wash over you like a cool breeze, allowing it to settle without causing any unrest in your mind. You are observing the history of human desire, looking at it with the calm eyes of a philosopher who knows the truth. The weight of wealth has always been a paradox, a heavy burden that promises to make life lighter. We collect riches to find ease, yet the act of collecting often brings its own set toils and anxieties into our lives. You feel this contradiction in your spirit, acknowledging how we strive for more while often sacrificing the peace we already possess. But as you lie there, you realize that true wealth might be something far more elusive than anything found in a treasury or a vault. Think of the ancient mints where craftsmen hammered out coins with precision, imprinting their culture and their power onto every disc. Each strike of the hammer was a declaration. We exist, we have value, and we are here to stay. This human need to leave a mark, to make our presence known through the medium of currency, is a testament to our enduring will. You imagine the sound of those hammers in the distance, a steady drumming that signals the heartbeat of an ancient civilization. As you drift closer to sleep, you realize that we are all travelers on this road of value, seeking something more than just the glitter of gold. We seek meaning, purpose, and a connection to the world around us, even as we use money to navigate our paths. The history of wealth is our own story, an unfolding narrative of how we define ourselves through what we possess and what we let go. You are becoming one with the silence, letting the old stories carry you toward a peaceful rest. The transition from physical gold to something more complex was a slow evolution, a gradual changing of the guard in the history of human economy. It took centuries for humans to trust that a piece of stamped metal could represent a much larger value than its own weight. This trust is the foundation of everything we know about society, the invisible bond that holds us together when we trade our labors with one another. You feel this bond as you sit in the quietness of your own time, connected to every soul who ever traded a handful of grain for a moment of survival. As the night deepens and the shadows grow long, you hold these thoughts gently, letting them settle like silt at the bottom of a clear lake. The history of money is vast, but tonight it is just a soft murmur in your ear, a bedtime story of the human condition. You are moving from the hard reality of gold to the softness of sleep, leaving the heavy burdens behind as you prepare for your journey into dreams. The weight is lifting, and all that remains is the quiet, steady pulse of existence. In the vast, unfolding tapestry of human history, we must look back to a time when the concept of money was not something held in a hand, but something felt in the gut. Long before there were mints or merchants with ledgers, there was only the directness of need and the immediate reality of survival. You can almost feel the texture of the ancient world through your mind's eye, the rough grain of wheat, the coarse wool of a goat's fleece, the sharp edge of an obsidian blade used to trade for a handful of dried fruit. In those days, wealth was not a number or an abstract concept. It was a tangible asset that could feed a family or protect a tribe during a harsh winter. This era of barter was the first dance of human value, a rhythmic back and forth between neighbors who needed what the other possessed to endure another sunrise. Imagine yourself walking through a prehistoric clearing where two travelers meet on a dusty path, their eyes meeting with a silent question of worth. There is no gold to weigh, no paper to sign. There is only the heavy sack of salt or the surplus of dried meat that one carries to offer in exchange for the other's tools. In this era, value was deeply personal and intensely local, tied directly to the utility of an object and the life-sustaining power it held within its physical form. To barter was to engage in a conversation without words, a negotiation of necessity that required trust, even if that trust was limited to the person standing right before you. You can sense the tension of those early trades, the careful weighing of a spear against a bundle of hides, the silent calculation of how much grain is equal to a sturdy clay vessel. As you settle into your warmth, consider how the necessity of barter began to shape the very structures of human society and human psychology. When people began to trade more frequently, they had to find common ground, finding ways to bridge the gap between what one person had too much of and what another lacked. This was a delicate balancing act, often fraught with the difficulty of finding a perfect match, the classic problem where you have a surplus of grain but need wool, yet the wool seller has no use for grain at this exact moment. You can almost hear the murmurs of these ancient negotiations, the low hum of voices trying to find an equilibrium in a world where nothing was truly equal. It was a constant, restless search for balance, a puzzle that humans had been solving since we first walked upright. The complexity of barter grew as human societies expanded, moving from small clans to larger networks of wandering tribes and settled villagers. The more people there were, the harder it became to find someone who wanted exactly what you carried, leading to the ingenious but cumbersome method of indirect trade. You might carry a surplus of salt to a distant village, trading it for beads, then trading those beads at a mountain pass for something else entirely. A chain of value that stretched across vast, rugged landscapes. This was a slow and winding road, a labyrinthine path where wealth could be lost or gained with every step taken through the wilderness. It was an era of great physical effort, where the movement of goods was as much about human muscle as it was about the value themselves. Think of the sheer weight of these goods, the heavy baskets, the heavy skins, the heavy bundles that men and women carried on their backs to facilitate the simple act of living. The concept of profit, as we know it today, did not exist in its modern sense. There was only the goal of acquiring enough to sustain the cycle of life. Yet, even then, a subtle competition might have stirred within the spirit, the desire to possess more than the neighbor, to hold the finest furs or the sharpest tools. This early friction between individual need and communal stability is where the seeds of our modern economic struggles were first planted, growing quietly in the fertile soil of human ambition. You feel this ancient tension as a soft vibration in your mind, an old echo of a struggle that has never truly ceased. In these times, value was also deeply tied to the scarcity of resources, making every trade a high-stakes endeavor of survival and cleverness. A drought could make a handful of seeds more precious than all the obsidian in the land, shifting the scales of power with the changing of the weather or the seasons. You can visualize the elders sitting by the fire, discussing the value of their stores, weighing the lives of their kin against the possessions they had gathered over many moons. It was a world where you could not hide your wealth behind walls. If you had much, it was visible in the strength of your tools and the fullness of your belly. This visibility made the social standing of an individual inseparable from their physical assets, creating a tight bond between personhood and prosperity. The concept of fairness was a fluid thing back then, subject to the whims of the season and the needs of the moment. A trade was not judged by a universal standard, but by its ability to keep one's family alive through the coming frost or the coming heat. You can imagine the clever merchants of old using their wits to ensure they walked away with more than they gave, yet always ensuring enough remained to keep the peace within the tribe. It was a game of survival played on a global stage, where the rules were written in the dirt and the stars, and the stakes were nothing less than life itself. The history of barter is the history of human cleverness meeting the unrelenting demands of nature. As you drift deeper into your slumber, consider how these early exchanges laid the groundwork for every economic system that would follow. The need to store value in a way that wouldn't rot or die was the driving force behind the invention of more permanent trade goods, the precursor to money itself. People began to look for objects that were durable, portable, and universally desired. Shells from the sea, strange stones from the mountains, or precious metals found in riverbeds. This transition from a barter of survival to a search for a universal medium was one of the most significant leaps in human history. It was the moment we stopped looking at what an object did and started looking at what it could represent. The weight of these thoughts is like the weight of old stones, grounding you in the reality of our ancestors' lives. They were not unlike us. They felt hunger, they felt greed, they felt the warmth of a full stomach, and they felt the cold of an empty hand. When we look back at their history, we are looking into a mirror that has been polished by the passing of countless generations. They lived in a world of much more direct consequence, where every trade was a physical reality they could touch and feel. You can almost feel the grit of the earth on your skin as you imagine their hands working to make ends meet through the simple, honest act of exchange. There is a certain beauty in the simplicity of that era. Even if it was difficult and fraught with danger, there was a clarity to a trade, a hand reaching out, an offering being made, and a mutual agreement reached between two living souls. The complexity we deal with today often masks this basic human truth, that we are all looking for something to sustain us, to provide comfort in a world that is often unpredictable. You can feel the breath of those ancient traders as they move through the forests or across the plains, their lives a constant movement of seeking and receiving. In the silence of your room, you might wonder if we have lost something by moving away from such tangible forms of value. When wealth is a commodity you can hold, its meaning is clear. When it becomes an abstract concept, it can become elusive and hard to grasp. The ancients had to be masters of their environment to make barter work, requiring a deep understanding of the world around them to judge what was truly worth something. This wisdom, the ability to see the true value of a thing, is a quality we often struggle to maintain in our modern, complex lives. You are learning from their history, absorbing the quiet lessons of their survival and their cleverness. Consider how the movement of people brought different goods together, creating the first networks of trade that spanned across valleys and mountains. These were the first highways of human need, where a person might travel for weeks just to find the right person with the right item to swap. This was not a journey of leisure, but a necessity of life, driven by the constant movement of human civilization as it sought better lands and more resources. The paths they trodden are now covered in grass or paved in stone, but the spirit of that movement remains a part of our collective memory. You can almost feel the rhythm of their footsteps as they walk along these ancient trails. As you lie still, think about how much human energy was spent simply on the act of moving goods from one place to another. The sheer physical toil required to maintain a livelihood through barter was immense, requiring strength, endurance, and an incredible amount of patience. It was a life lived in the present tense, where the immediate needs often outweighed long-term plans, yet there was a profound sense of timing involved in every transaction. This constant negotiation with time and space is what shaped our brains and our societies into what they are today. You can feel that ancient momentum, a slow but steady force moving through history toward you. The transition from the barter to something more permanent was not an overnight change. It was a long, winding evolution of human thought and social organization. It was a gradual realization that we needed a common language of value, something that could be carried easily and held in trust. This realization was the spark that ignited the next great era of human development, leading us toward the first coins and the rise of empires. You are witnessing this transition in your mind, watching as the pieces of the puzzle slowly begin to fit together, creating a picture of an ancient world coming alive. As you prepare for deeper sleep, let the sounds of the ancient world fade into a gentle hum. The voices of those who bartered, the rusts of their sacks, and the footsteps of their journeys are all part of the story that led to your own moment of peace. You are safe, you are still, and the history you carry is a heavy but beautiful thing. Let it settle within you as you move from the tangible world of barter into the next chapter of our journey. The transition from the shifting sands of barter to something more permanent was a monumental leap in the human story, an era where we sought to freeze value into a form that would not rot, wilt, or vanish. Imagine, if you will, the great thinkers and leaders of old standing by riverbeds or mountain streams, looking at the glinting nuggets of gold or the silver veins within the rock. They saw something more than just beautiful stones. They saw a potential vessel for human trust. The problem of barter, the difficulty of matching needs perfectly, had become a wall that society could no longer climb without a new tool. Humans needed an object that was scarce enough to be precious, but durable enough to endure the passage of years and the elements. This is where the story shifts from the organic to the mineral, as we began to seek out substances that could hold their value across time and space. As you lie there in the stillness, imagine a blacksmith or a mastersmith in an ancient workshop, the air thick with the scent of charcoal and the rhythmic clink-clink of a hammer against an anvil. They were working on the first great breakthrough, the creation of coinage. This was not merely about making something pretty, it was about creating a standard. By taking raw metal and stamping it with a specific weight and a seal of authority, they were creating a physical promise. A coin was a contract made visible, a guarantee that this piece of metal was exactly what the king or the city-state said it was. This was the birth of standardized value, a way to translate the vast complexity of human need into a single, portable unit of measure. Think about the sheer audacity of those first people who trusted that a small, stamped disc could represent the labor of a month or the grain of a season. To trust the coin was to trust the person who issued it, the king, the city-state, or the magistrate. This was a massive psychological shift. We were no longer just trading what we could see and touch in our immediate vicinity, but we were trading based on an abstract authority. It was a collective agreement that this metal had worth, because we all agreed it did. You could almost feel the weight of that trust, a heavy but vital bond that allowed societies to grow beyond the reach of a single handshake. The first coins were often irregular, not perfectly round as they are today, but their presence changed everything. They could be carried in pouches, tucked into belts, or hidden in jars, making wealth much more mobile than a herd of cattle or a sack of grain. This mobility meant that trade could move faster and influence could spread further. You can visualize the ancient travelers moving along dusty roads with coins clinking softly in their bags, a sound that signaled prosperity but also invited the eyes of thieves. The coin was an amplifier. It amplified the reach of our ambition and the scale of our connections. As you drift into a deeper state of relaxation, consider how much more difficult life became when we began to quantify everything. When wealth was measured in cows or grain, its value was deeply tied to life itself. But with the coin, we began to translate human existence into an abstract number. This allowed for larger-scale organization, the ability to pay soldiers, build massive temples, and fund vast bureaucratizations. But it also meant that something precious, like time or a person's labor, could be reduced to a cold, hard metal. The first coinage was the beginning of our long struggle to balance the human heart with the cold mathematics of the ledger. The metallurgy itself was a feat of incredible precision and artistry. Imagine the master engravers, working in candlelight, carefully carving the symbols of gods or the profiles of emperors into the soft metal before it was hardened. Each coin was a work of art, a miniature monument to the power and culture of its origin. These were not just tools for trade. They were carriers of identity. When you held an ancient coin, you weren't just holding wealth. You were holding the history and the pride of a civilization. The texture of those coins, the ridges, the smooth faces, the sharp edges, is something you can almost feel against your fingertips as you settle into your bed. There was also the matter of purity. In the ancient world, the value of a coin was inextricably linked to its metal content. If a coin was supposed to be pure gold, but was secretly mixed with copper, the trust would crumble. This led to the constant struggle against clipping, the practice where people would shave small bits of metal from the edges of coins to accumulate wealth for themselves. The tension between honesty and greed was built into the very physical structure of the currency. You can sense that ancient tug-of-war, a silent battle played out in the palms of hands as traders weighed their coins against one another. The spread of coinage across different cultures was like the spreading of a language. As trade routes expanded, people from distant lands had to learn how to read these new symbols of value. It created a common tongue that allowed strangers to interact with an unprecedented level of sophistication. A merchant in a far-off port could understand the value of a coin from a land they had never seen, because the weight and the metal were understood through the shared language of trade. This was the first great globalization, a silent network of metal connecting the known world. As you breathe slowly, think about how this era created the first real winners and losers in the economic sense. Those who could control the mints or secure the mines held immense power over the lives of others. The coin became a tool of governance as much as it was a tool of trade. It allowed leaders to gather the resources of an entire empire into a single treasury, providing the means for expansion, but also creating vast inequalities. This tension between the central authority and the individual's purse is an ancient melody that continues to play in our modern world. The sheer weight of these coins, when gathered in great heaps, must have been staggering. Imagine the sound of a heavy chest being opened, the metallic clatter, the bright flash of gold reflecting the torchlight. To the ancients, this was the ultimate symbol of success and security. Yet, we know now that even the heaviest hoard can be lost to war, time, or the shifting of borders. This realization brings a sense of quiet perspective. The coins were precious, but they were also transient. They were meant to move, to flow through the economy like water through an irrigation system. In the silence of your thoughts, consider the relationship between the coin and the person. In those days, you couldn't easily hide who you were by how much you had. Your wealth was often worn on your clothing or displayed in your home. The coin made it possible to accumulate more than one could ever use, leading to the first great hoards of the ancient world. This ability to store value for future generations changed the way families thought about their legacy and their survival. It was a move from a cycle of immediate need to a much longer, slower timeline of accumulation. The science of weighing the metal became an art form. Scales were crafted with delicate precision to ensure that the coins were fair. A merchant's scales were his most vital tool, and there was a constant vigilance in the market to ensure no one was being cheated of their metal. This era was defined by this constant, careful measurement, the tension between the weight we want and the weight we are given. You can feel that rhythmic balance, much like your own breathing, as you weigh the importance of these ancient truths. As you move closer to the edge of sleep, imagine the vastness of the empires that were built on the back of this coinage. From the Mediterranean to the far reaches of Asia, the movement of money was the movement of history itself. The coins were the seeds planted by kings to grow their influence across continents. While the people who minted them are long gone, the legacy of their economic structure remains in every piece of currency we use today. They solved the problem of trade, but they also introduced a new kind of complexity that we still grapple with as we move through our lives. The first coinage was a bridge between the physical world and the abstract world. It took something from the earth and gave it a social meaning. This transformation is one of the most profound shifts in human cognition, learning to trust an object because of its social contract. As you drift, let that thought settle. We are living in a world shaped by these ancient decisions, walking on paths laid down by those who first learned to hammer metal into value. The night is deep now, and the sounds of the ancient mints have faded into a soft velvet silence. The clinking of coins becomes the gentle patter of rain or the rustle of leaves. You are leaving behind the hard metal and moving toward the softness of thought and dream. The era of the first coinage was one of structure, weight, and certainty. Now, you prepare to let go of that weight and float into the ethereal realm of sleep. The era of the first coin was merely the prologue. What followed was a grand, sweeping epic, the rise of the great empires that turned money into an instrument of absolute power. As you drift deeper into your rest, imagine the vast landscapes where the clink of a single coin could echo with the weight of entire legions. We move now from the small marketplace to the sprawling halls of palaces and the rugged frontiers of conquered lands. The coinage was no longer just for local trade. It had become the fuel for the engines of statecraft. This is the era of empire, where gold and silver were the lifeblood that allowed a single authority to reach across vast distances, binding disparate cultures into a singular, much larger entity. Imagine yourself as a traveler on a Roman road or a Persian highway, feeling the dust beneath your feet, but also sensing the immense structure of the state surrounding you. The empires of old were not merely built on stone and mortar. They were built on the ability to collect, move, and spend vast quantities of specie. A king's power was measured by his ability to command the wealth within his borders and the strength of those who guarded it. When a leader minted their own image onto gold, they weren't just creating currency. They were projecting their divine or worldly will into every hand that held it. The coin became an ambassador, traveling from the capital to the furthest province, reminding every subject of the empire's reach. Think of the sheer logistical marvel required to maintain such a vastness. An empire needs soldiers, and soldiers need to be paid. They need administrators, who require grain. They need builders, who require tools. This massive, hungry machine was kept running by the constant flow of minted wealth. You can visualize the great caravans and the seafaring ships, laden with chests of bullion, moving through mountain passes and across treacherous oceans to ensure the coffers remained full. The movement of money became a rhythmic pulse, much like your own breathing, sustaining a living, breathing entity that stretched from one end of the known world to the other. In this time, wealth was not just about personal comfort. It was about the scale of human ambition. Great monuments, the pyramids, the great temples, the colossal aqueducts were financed by the surplus of an entire continent's labor, funneled through the medium of coin. You could almost see the architects and engineers standing amidst these massive projects, their eyes on the horizon, while the coffers provided the means to turn vision into reality. But this ambition was a double-edged sword. It required constant expansion and more resources to sustain its own weight. The very thing that built the empire, the accumulation of wealth, was also the pressure that could cause its structure to buckle under its own gravity. As you settle even deeper, consider how the presence of such vast wealth created new social hierarchies that were more rigid than ever before. In an imperial system, your relationship with money often determined your place in the cosmos. There were those who commanded the gold and those whose labor was traded for it. This era saw the professionalization of the economy, the rise of tax collectors, financiers, and bureaucrats who managed the intricate web of wealth. You can sense the tension between the ruling elite, sitting on heaps of precious metal, and the common people, whose lives were shaped by the taxes they paid to keep the empire standing. There was a certain dark beauty in how the empires used money as a tool of war. To expand the borders, one needed an army. To feed the army, one needed more land and more resources. The conquest was often driven by the need for the very metal that paid for the conquest itself. It was a cycle of expansion. The gold from the conquered lands would fund the next campaign, making the empire larger still. You can almost hear the march of thousands of boots on gravel, accompanied by the heavy clinking of legionnaires' purses, a sound of power that signaled both the arrival of order and the beginning of upheaval. The idea of a standardized economy became a tool of unification. When an empire could enforce one type of coin across many different lands, it created a sense of shared reality. A merchant in Egypt might use the same currency as a citizen in Greece or Anatolia. This was a massive leap toward a unified human experience, even if that unity was often enforced by the sword. You can visualize the various cultures meeting at the crossroads of an empire, their different traditions blending with the common language of trade. The coin became the thread that wove these disparate lives into one tapestry. But we must also consider the shadows cast by such great wealth. Where there is immense gold, there is great temptation and great danger. The struggle for control over mines and trade routes led to legendary battles and long-standing feuds. For many, the empire was not a protector but an extractor, a force that took their hard-earned grain or coin to fuel the grandeur of far-off capitals. You can feel the weight of those historical tensions, the silent struggle between the center and the periphery, where wealth flowed inward like a great tide, often leaving the edges dry and hungry. The sheer scale of these empires meant that money was no longer just about local survival. It was about global dominance. It allowed for the creation of trade networks so vast they spanned continents, creating an interdependence that we might not fully realize until much later in history. You can imagine the sailors on a Mediterranean galley or the riders on the Silk Road, knowing their wealth was tied to paths thousands of miles long. This connectivity made the world feel smaller, yet also more precarious, as the fall of one city could cause ripples of economic ruin across an entire sea. As you lie still in your quiet room, think about the concept of tribute. In many empires, wealth was not just earned. It was demanded from vassal states and conquered peoples. This was a constant flow of value towards the center, building the magnificent palaces we study today. It is a sobering thought to realize that much of history's greatest architecture was paid for by the heavy hand of imperial taxation. Yet, in those very buildings, the human spirit found its voice, the desire to reach for the stars and leave something lasting behind. The stability of an empire often depended on the integrity of its money. If a ruler began to debase the currency, mixing the gold with cheaper metals to pay more soldiers, the very foundation of their power could begin to crack. The trust was the most valuable thing they possessed, and once that trust was lost through inflation or greed, even the strongest walls could fall. You can sense this fragile balance between the physical reality of the metal and the social reality of its value, a delicate dance that every great leader had to master to maintain their reign. Consider the legendary figures who were defined by their wealth: Caesar, Alexander, or the great emperors of the East. They are often remembered for their conquests, but they were also masters of the treasury. The ability to manage the vast resources of a continent was as much a part of their legacy as their tactical genius on the battlefield. You can almost see them sitting in their quiet studies, looking over maps and ledgers, knowing that every move they made required a mountain of silver to be successful. In the stillness of your mind, we reflect on how these empires were not just political entities, but economic engines. They organized the world into a structure of flow wealth, moving from the people to the state, and back out as protection or public works. This was the first great attempt at managing the wealth of humanity on a massive scale. While they rose and fell, they left behind the blueprints for how we organize ourselves, how we tax, how we spend, and how we govern the vastness of human ambition. As you move toward deeper sleep, Let the grandeur of these ancient halls settle into a soft hum in your mind. The empires were grand, but they too are now echoes of history, much like the sound of a distant drum. They remind us that even the mightiest structures were built by human hands and sustained by human desire. You are not lost in their vastness. You are simply observing the magnificent scale of our ancestors' journey, feeling the strength of their ambition as it carries you toward rest. The era of empire was a time of heavy gold and even heavier responsibility. The weight of the world seemed to rest on the shoulders of those who held the purse strings. But as the centuries turn, we see that empires are but seasons in the history of mankind. They bloom with prosperity and fade into legend. You can let go of that grandeur now, allowing yourself to be small, quiet, and peaceful. The weight is lifting, leaving only the calm of the present moment. The grand, heavy weight of empire was a spectacle of metal and stone, but as the centuries turned, a new kind of magic began to emerge, a shift from the solid to the ethereal. Imagine you are standing in an ancient counting house or a bustling port, where the sheer volume of gold became too great to carry, too massive to move with ease. The empires had reached a point where they needed more than just coins. They needed a way to represent wealth without the crushing burden of its physical weight. This is the story of paper promises, the moment when we realized that value could be carried in a thin sheet of parchment or a slip of fine paper, held by a hand but much lighter than the gold it represented. The transition from metal to paper was one of the most radical shifts in human cognition. The belief that a piece of paper could serve as a vessel for 1,000 coins. As you lie there, let your mind wander to the olden days when merchants began to use bills of exchange. Imagine a trader in a distant land who has far too much gold to carry safely through bandit-ridden mountains or stormy seas. To solve this, they would leave their heavy treasure with a trusted banker, a vault of stone and iron, and receive in return a paper note, a written promise that the bearer could claim the metal when needed. This was a profound moment of trust. You are no longer carrying the gold, but rather the idea of the gold, written in ink upon a page. It was a ghost of wealth, a shadow that moved through the world with ease, yet carried the same weight as the coins themselves. Think about the delicate tension inherent in this new reality. A piece of paper is fragile. It can tear, it can burn, or it can be lost to a gust of wind. Yet for centuries, people have trusted these slips of parchment more than they might trust their own eyesight. This was the beginning of representative money, the realization that the object itself didn't need to be precious, as long as the promise it carried was backed by something real. You could almost feel the texture of that old, thick paper between your fingers. Not quite smooth like a polished coin, but carrying the weight of authority in every stroke of the quill. The rise of paper money also brought with it the first great complexities of finance and bureaucracy. As these notes began to circulate, they required systems of verification, signatures, seals, and watermarks to prevent forgery. The scribes and clerks became as essential to the economy as the miners and smiths had once been. You can visualize a quiet, candlelit room where an official carefully inspects a document under a magnifying glass, ensuring that the ink is true and the seal is legitimate. This was the birth of a new kind, a sophisticated layer of human trust built upon the written word to manage the vastness of trade. As you drift deeper into your slumber, consider how this shift changed the very tempo of life. Paper moved faster than gold could be hauled by ox carts or ships. It allowed for much larger transactions and more complex credit systems to flourish. The movement of wealth became a swift current rather than a slow, heavy tide. Yet, with this speed came new fears. If the paper was nothing but air, what would happen if the source of its value, the gold in the vault, disappeared? This era taught us that we were no longer just trading matter, but we were trading the collective belief of our fellow humans. The history of paper is also a history of the state's growing influence. Governments realized that by issuing these notes, they could manage their own resources on an unprecedented scale. A king or a ruler could print the means to fund armies and build cities with much greater ease than before. But this brought a dangerous temptation, the urge to issue more paper than there was gold to back it. This delicate balance between the written promise and the physical reality became the central tension of our financial history. You can feel that ancient tug of war, a quiet struggle between the tangible earth and the intangible idea of value. In the quiet dark, imagine the great trade routes where these papers were passed from hand to hand. A merchant in an ancient city might receive a paper note for his silk or spices, knowing he could present it at a distant outpost to receive his payment. This was the expansion of human networks, stretching across borders and through cultures, held together by nothing but the legitimacy of the seal. The idea of credit to lend trust began to take hold. It was a beautiful, terrifying leap into the unknown, trusting that someone else's word, captured in ink, was as good as gold itself. As you breathe steadily, think about how much more abstract our world became during this era. The connection between the physical labor of working and the paper received in return began to stretch thin. When wealth is a heavy coin, you know exactly what it represents. When it is a piece with a number on it, it becomes a symbol that requires constant validation. This was the start of our long walk toward abstraction, as we moved away from the solid reality of the earth and into the realm of mathematics and paper-thin promises. The sheer scale of these bureaucracies was breathtaking to the people living through them. To manage such systems required vast networks of messengers, clerks, and guards. This era saw the rise of a new class of professionals, those who lived by their ability to read, write, and calculate the shifting values of paper and metal. You can see them in your mind's eye. The scribes with their ink-stained fingers, the accountants with their ledgers, all working in the service of an invisible flow that kept the great machinery of civilization moving. There was also a quiet danger to this era, the risk of paper being nothing but empty words. If a government fell or a vault was emptied, the paper became nothing more than scraps for a fire. This taught humanity a hard lesson about the importance of stability and the necessity of backing our promises with something solid. It was an era of learning how to manage trust on a grand scale, a time when we were testing the limits of what human society could collectively believe in. In your peaceful rest, consider how these paper notes were often as beautiful as they were functional. They were crafted with intricate designs, portraits of leaders, and symbols of national pride. To hold such a note was to hold a piece of one's nation's identity. This is where the modern concept of national currency truly took root. The idea that our money doesn't just have value, but it carries the soul of our people. The paper became a carrier of culture, moving through the hands of the commoner and the noble alike. As you settle into your bed, imagine the vast archives where these old documents were kept. Endless shelves of parchment, smelling of dust and old ink. These were the libraries of value, the repositories of human trust. The history of paper is a story of people trying to capture the essence of worth in something that could be easily carried, but still carry the weight of truth. It was an era of immense ingenuity, as humans learned to navigate the space between the solid gold and the empty air of pure thought. The transition from metal to paper was not just a change in medium. It was a change in how we perceived reality itself. We were learning that value is often something we create together through agreement. This realization allowed for the expansion of trade, but it also required us to become much more vigilant about our integrity. You can feel this ancient wisdom settling into your spirit, the understanding that while the tools may change, the human need for a reliable promise remains constant. As you move toward a deeper state of sleep, let the rustle of old parchment be like the sound of soft rain on a window pane. The heavy gold has been set aside. Now we deal with something much lighter, yet filled with the complex history of human trust and paper-thin promises. You are drifting through the archives of time, where every thought is as light as a leaf, but carries the profound depth of human experience. The night is yours to own, and as you leave the heavy metals behind, you move toward the lightness of the written word. The era of paper was one of expansion, complexity, yes, and the great challenge of trust. You are safe in your quietness, letting the ancient scribes and merchants guide you into a peaceful, dreamless rest. As the paper promises of the previous era began to settle into the folds of history, we move our gaze from the quiet scribes and their ledgers toward the horizon, where the vastness of the world beckoned with a restless energy. Imagine yourself standing at the edge of a great desert, or upon the deck of a massive wooden vessel, looking out over an expanse so wide it seems to touch the very heavens. We transition now to the Silk Road, the era of the great trade routes, where wealth was not merely stored in vaults, but traveled across continents in magnificent, winding caravans. This is the story of how the movement of goods became a global pulse, weaving together the fates of distant civilizations through the sheer necessity of exchange and the allure of luxury. In this era of grand journeys, you can almost hear the rhythmic footfalls of camels and the creak of wooden ships as they traversed paths that seemed impossible to cross. The Silk Road was not a single road, but a vast network of veins that pumped life between the East and the then West. Imagine the sheer variety of treasures being carried, shimmering silks from far-off provinces, fragrant spices that could change the very scent of an empire, precious gems, fine porcelains, and delicate teas. This was a world where wealth was in constant motion, moving through mountain passes and over vast oceans to reach those who desired its unique beauty. As you lie there in the quiet darkness, consider the immense bravery required to participate in such a journey. To be a merchant on these routes was to embrace a life of profound uncertainty and risk. A trader might travel for months, facing nothing but the wind, the sand, or the deep blue sea, all for the sake of bringing back something that could not be found at home. This is where our relationship with money began to take on an adventurous quality. It was no longer just about having enough. It was about the pursuit of the exotic and the rare. The value of an item was often determined by how far it had traveled, its scarcity becoming a silent testament to the distance it had crossed. Think of the bustling caravanserais, the ancient inns that dotted the great trade routes like lonely beacons in a vast landscape. These were the meeting points of worlds, where travelers from different cultures would gather to rest, share stories, and exchange more than just goods. In these places, ideas flowed alongside silks. Mathematics, philosophy, and religion were traded with as much vigor as spices or salt. You can visualize the flickering fires in a dim courtyard at night, the sound of many languages mingling under a canopy of stars. This was a global conversation happening long before the modern age, a slow-motion globalization that relied on the human will to connect. The scale of this trade was staggering. It required massive networks of support, translators who could bridge linguistic gaps, guides who knew the hidden wells in the desert, and guards who protected the precious cargo from bandits. The economy of these routes was a complex web where everyone played a part, from the noble who commissioned the goods to the lowly porter who carried them on their back. You can feel the tension of that movement, the constant heavy momentum of wealth moving from one end of the world to this other, always pushing forward, driven by the insatiable human curiosity for what lies beyond the next dune or sea mist. As you drift deeper into your thoughts, consider how these trade routes created a new kind of interdependence. A weaver in a distant city might produce silk specifically because they knew there was a demand in a far-off empire. A spice merchant might rely on sailors from lands they would never visit to bring their goods to market. This was the beginning of an interconnected global economy, where the prosperity of one region could influence the stability of another. It was a delicate web of human reliance, a beautiful but precarious balance that required immense courage to maintain. In the quietness of your room, imagine the sheer physical sensation of these trades. The weight of spices like cinnamon and peppercorn, the delicate, almost ethereal touch of fine silk, the hard, cold glint of jade or lapis lazuli, These were things that could not be easily quantified in a ledger. Their value was partly in their beauty, their rarity, and the sheer story they told of the journey they had survived. We are learning here that as wealth became more global, it also became more sensory, a mixture of the tangible material and the intangible allure of the foreign. The Silk Road and its maritime cousins were also conduits for immense wealth, but they were also paths of great peril. The quest for profit often led to conflict over control of these vital routes. You can sense the silent battles fought in the shadows, the competition between empires to secure the ports, the struggle for dominance over the mountain passes, and the constant tension between those who sought peaceful trade and those who sought conquest. It was a world where wealth could be as fleeting as a mirthful breeze, or as enduring as the stones of an ancient city. Think about the merchants themselves, the travelers who lived on the edge of the known world. They were the pioneers of human connection, the ones who brought the distant into the realm of the familiar. To them, money was not just a means to an end. It was often the fuel for their wanderlust. The wealth they accumulated was a trophy of their survival and their wit. You could almost feel their presence in the dark, the weary but determined traveler, looking at the stars to guide their way, knowing that the riches they carry are the bridge between their old life and a new destiny. The influence of these roots was profound, shaping the cultures they touched. When exotic goods entered a society, they changed its tastes, its fashions, and even its social structures. A person with fine silk or rare spices held a status that tranced local boundaries. This era saw the rise of a cosmopolitan elite people who were shaped by the global nature of their wealth. You can visualize these ancient courts, filled with the scents and colors of a dozen different lands, all thanks to the long, winding paths of trade that brought them together. As you breathe slowly, reflect on how we still live in the wake of these journeys. Our modern world is an extension of those old trails, much faster and more efficient, but driven by the same fundamental human hunger for connection and novelty. The history of the Silk Road is a reminder that we have always been travelers, seeking to expand our horizons through the medium of trade. It was a movement of people as much as its wealth, a constant shuffling of humanity across the face of the earth. In your peaceful slumber, consider how these routes were often one-way streets of luck and fate. A merchant might set out with everything they owned and return with nothing but stories. The gamble was the essence of trade. This taught us about the volatility of value, that wealth is not a static thing to be hoarded, but something that flows in waves, rising and falling with the tides of history and the whims of fortune. You can feel that rhythmic ebb and flow, much like the breathing of the ocean against a distant shore. The history of these routes also tells a story of human ingenuity. The invention of better compasses, sturdier ships, and more efficient pack saddles was driven by the need to make the long journeys slightly less impossible. We were constantly refining our tools to master the distance. You are witnessing this unfolding saga, the slow but steady expansion of the human reach, as we pushed ourselves to find new ways to connect with one another through the exchange of treasures. As you move toward a deeper state of rest, let the vastness of the ancient trade routes wrap around you like a warm, soft blanket. The dust of the road and the spray of the sea are far away now. You are moving beyond the physical distance to the essence of the journey, the human desire to reach out, to trade, and to find meaning in the movement between worlds. The wealth is not in the goods, but in the connection they create. The night is deep, and the caravans have found their rest for the evening. The stars above the desert or the moon over the sea guide you toward a peaceful landing in the realm of dreams. You are leaving behind the dust and the distance, moving into a place where all journeys find their end in tranquility. As we leave the dust of the caravans and the salt spray of the great sea routes, we enter a much more turbulent era, a time when the movement of goods was no longer just about silk or spice, but about the heavy, clinking chains of global empire. Imagine yourself standing on the docks of a bustling harbor in the late 17th century. The air is thick with the smell of tar, salted cod, and the sharp, metallic scent of new wealth flowing into Europe from distant, colonized shores. We move now to the era of mercantilism, a time when the world became a massive chessboard, where nations vied for dominance through the ruthless pursuit of gold, silver, and trade monopolies. This was an age of profound richness, but even greater tension, as the hunger for wealth began to reshape the very maps of the world. In this era of mercantilism, the philosophy was simple yet aggressive. There is a finite amount of wealth in the world, and for one nation to grow, it must take from another. You can visualize the great halls of kings and ministers, where men with powdered wigs and heavy ledgers sat around oak tables, calculating the balance of trade like soldiers planning a siege. Wealth was seen as a zero-sum game, a tug-of-war between empires. The goal was to export much and import little, to hoard the gold within one's own borders, while ensuring that the wealth of rival nations flowed toward your own treasury. This was the era where trade became an instrument of statecraft, often indistinguishable from war itself. Think of the massive wooden ships, the galleons, and the frigates that dominated the oceans. These were not merely vessels for trade. They were floating fortresses, designed to carry vast quantities of bullion and precious goods while defending them against pirates and rival navies. The sheer scale of these maritime expeditions was staggering. To fund a single voyage to the Americas or the East Indies required an enormous amount of capital, often provided by new banking institutions and the wealth of merchant nobles. You can almost feel the creak of the timber and the tension in the sails as these ships braved the Atlantic and Pacific, carrying the hopes and the greed of entire nations across the waves. As you lie there, consider how this era changed the human concept of value. The focus shifted from the local community to the national coffers. Wealth was no longer just about a merchant's prosperity. It was about the strength of the crown or the state. This led to the creation of massive chartered companies' monopolies that held the power to govern entire regions, mint their own coins, and wage war in the name of their shareholders. You can visualize the official with his heavy seal, signing a document that could change the lives of thousands of people on a distant coast, all to ensure the flow of wealth remained constant for his masters at home. There was a dark, heavy shadow cast by this era, the cost of human labor and the exploitation of the colonized world. The pursuit of mercantilism drove the expansion of empires into Africa, Asia, and the Americas, often through the forced movement of people to work the plantations and mines that fueled European prosperity. This is a sobering reality. The gold in a king's vault was often paid for by the sweat and blood of those far from his sight. You can sense the weight of this history, the deep, uneven scales of justice, where one person's luxury was built upon another's struggle to survive. It was an era of immense prosperity for some, but it was a lopsidedness that left scars on the face of the earth. In the stillness of your thoughts, reflect on how this period created the first truly global economic networks, yet they were often built on coercion rather than pure cooperation. The trade routes we discussed in that previous era were becoming more formalized and more contested. It was no longer just about a single merchant's journey. It was about the organized, state-sponsored extraction of resources. You could almost hear the sound of coins being counted in heavy chests, a metallic clinking that echoed through the halls of power, representing the wealth extracted from far-off lands to fuel the rise of modern global powers. The concept of protectionism was born in this era, the idea of building walls around one's economy through tariffs and taxes to keep competitors at bay. This created a constant state of friction between nations, a restless, churning sea of economic competition. You can visualize the docks where ships were searched for contraband, and the customs houses where officials meticulously weighed the cost of every bale of cloth or sack of sugar. The world was becoming more connected through trade, yet it was also becoming more divided by the fierce desire to dominate the flow of that very same wealth. As you drift deeper into your slumber, consider the role of the sea as a highway and a battlefield. For the merchant, the ocean was a path to unimaginable fortune. For the sailor, it was a treacherous expanse that could swallow a life or a treasure in an instant. The ships were the veins through which the wealth of nations pulsed, but they were also the targets of endless conflict. You can feel the rhythmic swell of the waves against the hull, a constant heavy motion that carried the weight of human ambition across the vast, dark oceans. The era of mercantilism also saw the rise of the first modern banks and sophisticated insurance systems to mitigate the risks of these great voyages. Because the stakes were so high, people needed new ways to protect their investments. This led to a more complex financial landscape. Stocks, bonds, and maritime insurance became the tools used to manage the immense uncertainty of global trade. You can imagine the brokers in the coffee houses of London or Amsterdam, shouting over the din as they traded pieces of paper representing shares in distant voyages. It was an era where risk was being quantified and sold, a precursor to the modern financial world. Think of how much of our current political and economic structure can be traced back to these centuries of competition. The struggle for resources, for land, for coal, or for oil is the descendant of the struggle for spices and gold. We are still living in the shadow of those old empires, trying to balance the needs of a nation with the reality of a globalized world. You can feel that ancient tension as it settles into your mind, the desire to grow and to possess, held against the vastness of the natural world that we all inhabit. The sheer scale of these expeditions was an incredible human feat. To organize a fleet of ships, to coordinate hundreds of sailors, and to manage the logistics of a voyage around the globe required a level of organization never before seen in history. It was a testament to the power of organized wealth, the ability to harness human effort on a global scale for a single purpose. You can almost see the maps being unfolded by candlelight, the ink tracing out the paths of conquest and trade as the world's leaders looked at their charts with hungry eyes. In your quiet rest, reflect on how these massive movements of wealth changed the very texture of human life. The arrival of new goods, tobacco, coffee, sugar transformed the habits and societies of entire continents. A person's morning ritual might now depend on a commodity grown thousands of miles away. This was the beginning of an era where the domestic life of the citizen became inextricably linked to the global economy. You are part of that legacy, someone whose comfort is shaped by the long, winding paths of history and trade. The tension between the wealth gathered and the human cost remains one of history's great questions. As we look back at the kings and the merchants, we must also look at the people who lived in their wake. The pursuit of more often came at a heavy price for those who had much less. This realization brings a sense of quiet reflection. It reminds us that wealth is not just an abstract number, but something that has real-world consequences for every human soul on this planet. You are holding these thoughts gently, letting them be part of your understanding. As the night deepens, let the sound of the crashing waves and the creaking ships fade into a soft murmur. The great empires were grand in their ambition, but they too were subject to the tides of time. They rose on the strength of their fleets and fell when their coffers could no longer hold back the tide of change. You are safe in your bed, drifting away from the turbulent seas of history toward the calm, still waters of sleep. The era of mercantilism was a heavy one, filled with the weight of iron, wood, and gold. But as you move into the next chapter, we will see how even these heavy things began to shift once more. You are leaving the docks behind, letting the vastness of the old seaways carry you toward a deep and peaceful rest. The heavy, salt-crusted ships of the mercantilist era began to dock at a new kind of shore, not just a physical port, but a psychological one. As we move from the maritime wars and the global struggle for gold, we enter a period of roaring sound, clanking iron, and sudden, explosive growth. Imagine yourself standing in the middle of a sprawling, soot-stained city in the late 18th or early 19th century. The air is no longer just filled with the smell of sea salt. It is thick with the heavy, sulfurous scent of coal smoke and the rhythmic, thunderous pounding of steam engines. We move now to the industrial gold rush, the era when machines and capital merged to create an unprecedented hunger for wealth. This was a time when the old ways of living were being upended by the sheer force of mechanical ingenuity and the massive accumulation of capital required to fuel it. In this transformative epoch, the focus shifted from the movement of goods across oceans to the extraction and processing of resources at an unfathomable scale. The Industrial Revolution was a seismic shift in human existence. It was the moment when the strength of a man's arm began to be augmented by the power of the engine. You can visualize the great ironworks, the massive looms, and the first locomotives puffing clouds of white steam as they carved new paths through the landscape. This era saw the rise of the factory, a central hub where labor was organized with clockwork precision, all in the pursuit of producing more, faster, and cheaper than ever before. The very concept of time itself began to change, moving from the cycles of the sun to the rigid ticking of the factory whistle. As you lie there in your quiet darkness, consider how this era changed our relationship with the material world. Wealth was no longer just about having a surplus. It was about owning the means of production. To be wealthy meant to own the machines that could shape the world. The hunger for capital became a driving force of human ambition to build a factory, to fund a railroad, to secure the coal mines that would feed the hungry fires of progress. You could almost feel the heat radiating from those great furnaces, an intense energy that fueled both the growth of civilization and the restless spirit of modern capitalism. The scale of this era was unlike anything humans had experienced before. The sheer amount of capital required to build a railway or a massive textile mill meant that the wealthy became more concentrated than ever. This was the age of the great captains of industry, men whose fortunes were built on the back of coal, steel, and steam. You can visualize the vast, sprawling networks of tracks stretching across continents like the veins of a titan, connecting distant cities in a web of iron and commerce. The movement of people and goods became more rapid, yet it also brought with it a new kind of urban density, the rise of crowded, bustling metropolises that never seemed to sleep. Think about the human cost of this great acceleration. While the machines provided unprecedented wealth, they also demanded an immense amount of human labor. The transition from the farm to the factory was a jarring reality for millions. You can sense the tension in the air, the struggle between the traditional life and the new industrial grind. People were being pulled into a world of shifts, schedules, and wages, leaving behind the familiar rhythms of the land. This era was a magnificent achievement of human cleverness, but it was also a period where the soul often felt caught in the gears of a massive, unfeeling machine. In the stillness of your thoughts, reflect on how the search for gold became the search for coal and iron. The hunger for these materials drove men to dig deep into the earth, carving out vast pits and tunnels that stretched far below the surface. This was a new kind of frontier, an underground landscape where wealth was found in the dark veins of the rock. You could almost hear the muffled sounds of the miners' picks and the low rumble of the carts as they brought forth the fuel for an entire civilization. The earth itself became a vast treasury to be tapped, a source of immense power that promised endless prosperity. The era also saw the birth of modern finance in its most aggressive form. To fund these massive industrial ventures, people needed more than just personal savings. They needed the ability to pool resources on an enormous scale. This led to the expansion of stock markets and the sophisticated management of corporate capital. You can visualize the bustling trading floors, filled with men in top hats shouting orders as they traded shares in railroads and mines. It was a high-stakes game where fortunes were made or lost in a single afternoon, creating an era of intense economic volatility that mirrored the roaring engines themselves. As you drift deeper into your slumber, consider how this era began to distance us from the natural world. For the first time, human prosperity was not just tied to what the land could provide in a season, but to what we could extract and transform through technology. The landscape was being reshaped, forests were cleared for coal, Rivers were dammed for power, and mountains were leveled for ore. This is where our modern tension with nature truly began, the delicate struggle between our desire to harness the Earth's energy and our need to live in balance with its rhythms. The rise of the middle class was another profound effect of this era. As industry grew, a new layer of society emerged: the managers, engineers, lawyers, and clerks who managed the complexities of an industrial economy. This provided a new level of mobility and wealth for many, creating a more complex social hierarchy than the old feudal systems could have imagined. You can visualize the growing cities, the rise of grand libraries, theaters, and parks as this new class sought to define its own culture and status. It was a time of great social shifting, a restless movement from one station to another. There was also an inherent danger in the massive scale of these machines. A single failure in a boiler or a collapse in a mine could be catastrophic. The era was defined by this sense of powerful but precariousness, the immense strength of human invention held against the constant threat of mechanical disaster. You can feel that tension, like a low-frequency hum in the background of your mind, the thrill of progress balanced against the heavy risk of its sheer magnitude. Think about how much of our modern world was forged in these fires. The infrastructure we use today, our roads, our power grids, our urban structures are the descendants of those first great industrial projects. We are still living in an era that is essentially a refinement of the Victorian and industrial spirit. You can almost see the blueprints being laid out, the heavy iron chains of history pulling us toward a future we were just beginning to understand. In your quiet rest, consider how the concept of wealth was evolving from something you could hold in your hand to something that existed within complex systems and machines. It was becoming more abstract, even as it became more powerful. The sheer volume of material moving through the world was staggering. You can feel the immense momentum of this era, the feeling of a civilization catching flight, its engines roaring with the ambition of a billion souls. As you move toward a deeper state of rest, let the sounds of the steam whistle and the clinking of iron fade into a soft velvet silence. The machines are cooling now. The great forges are being banked with ash to await the morning. You are leaving behind the soot and the heavy gears, moving toward the quietude of your own spirit. The industrial era was a time of tremendous power and immense change. But as we move forward, we will see how even this massive force faced new challenges, how wealth can grow so fast that it begins to lose its grip on reality. You are safe in your bed, letting the heavy history carry you toward a peaceful landing in the realm of dreams. As the heavy iron gears of the industrial era began to turn with a relentless, almost overwhelming momentum, we moved toward a period where the very concept of value became as shifting and elusive as smoke. In the wake of massive growth and unprecedented production, societies faced a new, invisible foe: inflation. Imagine yourself standing in an old-world city square at the end of the 19th century, watching people trade coins that seemed to lose their substance even as they were handed from one person to another. We move now to the ghost of value, the era where we began to see how the rapid expansion of money could lead to its own fading strength. This is the story of the struggle between the rising quantity of money and the stable value it was meant to represent. A silent battle fought within the ledgers and the pockets of every citizen. In this time, the sheer abundance of wealth produced by machines began to create friction with the fixed reality of human needs. As more gold, silver, or paper entered circulation, the purchasing power of a single unit often began to slip through one's fingers like sand in an hourglass. You can visualize the bewildered faces of merchants as they realize that the coins accepted yesterday are no longer enough to buy the same bushel of grain today. This was not just a change in prices. It was a fundamental shift in the relationship between a human being and their labor. The struggle was not merely about having more, but about the terrifying realization that what you possessed might be worth less than it was when you first earned it. As you lie there in your quiet darkness, consider how the specter of inflation began to haunt the stability of families and nations alike. When a government prints or mints more to fund its grand ambitions, its wars, its railways, its sprawling bureaucracies, the value of every existing coin is subtly diluted. This was a ghost that could not be seen, but could be felt in the empty belly or the thinning purse. You can almost hear the murmurs in the market stalls, the quiet, anxious discussions about how much a loaf of bread costs today compared to last month. It was an era where the stability we once took for granted became a flickering light, casting long shadows of uncertainty over every transaction. The history of value is often a story of the tension between supply and demand on a grand, systemic scale. When the industrial machines produced goods faster than they could be consumed, or when more money flooded the economy than there were goods to buy, the very ground of economic reality began to shake. This was the first time humanity truly grappled with the ghost within the currency. Realization that wealth is not just a number, but a ratio between what we have and what we need. You can feel this ancient tension in your own mind, the attempt to hold on to something solid when the world around it is constantly shifting its scale. Think about the social upheavals caused by these fluctuations. When the value of money changes too rapidly, the social contracts that bind a community can begin to fray. Those with fixed assets might find themselves suddenly rich or poor. Those whose wealth was in wages might find their hard work yielding less and less sustenance. This created a sense of volatility that made the future seem unpredictable. You can visualize the great migrations of families moving in search of more stable lands, or laborers moving toward new industries to keep pace with the rising costs of living. It was a restless time where the pursuit of stability became the primary driver of human movement. In the stillness of your thoughts, reflect on how inflation is often the result of our own success and ambition. The more we expand, the more we produce, and the more we move. The more there is to manage, the harder it becomes to keep a steady hand on the scales. This was an era where human progress was outstripping the ability to contain the value of wealth within stable boundaries. You can sense the breath of those people, the constant searching inhale, as they tried to grasp hold of enough value to stay secure in an increasingly fast-moving world. There was also the matter of specie versus paper. As currencies became more widespread and less tied to a specific weight of gold, the distance between the money and its true value grew. This gap is where inflation lies in the space between what we say something is worth and what it can actually buy. You can almost feel the tension in that empty space, the invisible pressure of an economy expanding faster than its foundation. It was a period of learning how to manage an invisible force, trying to tame the ghost within the coin. As you drift deeper into your slumber, consider how these economic cycles have always been part of the human rhythm. We rise in periods of prosperity and fall into periods of scarcity or inflation. The ancients knew this. They lived through the booms and busts of their own eras. But for the moderns of the industrial age, it was a much more complex and terrifying experience because of the scale at which it occurred. You are witnessing the birth of our modern economic anxiety, the realization that wealth is not just something to be gathered, but something that must be constantly defended against its own dilution. The concept of value became increasingly tied to the trust we place in the institutions that manage it. When inflation rises, trust begins to wane. You can visualize the old bankers and government officials working frantically to adjust interest rates or limit production to keep the ghost at bay. It was a game of managing perception as much as managing metal. This is where modern economics began to take its sophisticated shape, as a constant effort to balance the reality of our needs with the perceptions of our wealth. Think about how much we rely on a stable price to plan for a life. A father saving for his daughter's education, or a farmer planning for next year's harvest, relies on the value remaining somewhat consistent. When inflation disrupts this, it disrupts the very fabric of human time, our ability to look ahead and build for the future. You can feel that ancient anxiety, the struggle to plan in a world where the finish line is constantly moving further away. The era also saw the rise of new investment strategies as people sought to hide their wealth from the eroding power of inflation. They bought land, they bought gold, they invested in the very machines that were driving the expansion. This created a cycle of intense capital movement, where money was constantly being funneled into assets that could hold its value. You can almost see the frantic energy of these investors, the movers and shakers trying to outrun the ghost by putting their wealth into something tangible enough to survive the change. In your peaceful rest, consider how much of our current economic thought is a response to these historic ghosts. We still struggle with the same balance. How to grow without losing ourselves to inflation. How to maintain stability while allowing for progress. The history of value is an ongoing lesson in human restraint and ambition. You are learning from their history, absorbing the quiet wisdom of those who tried to find solid ground on a shifting landscape. The sheer scale of these economic shifts was enough to topple thrones and redraw the maps of the world. It reminds us that wealth is not just about what we possess, but about the stability with which we hold it. You can feel that ancient tug-of-war in your spirit, the tension between the desire for more and then this need for something that lasts. As you move toward a deeper state of rest, let the sounds of the bustling market and the frantic scribes fade into a soft, velvet silence. The ghosts are settling now. They are being put to rest in the archives of history. You are leaving behind the vanishing value of the past, moving toward the quietness of your own existence, where value is simply, truly enough. The night is yours, and as we leave the shadows of inflation behind, we prepare for a new kind of transition, one that moves from the physical to something almost invisible. You are safe in your quietness, letting the old stories carry you toward a peaceful landing in the realm of dreams. The vanishing value of inflation taught us that money can be a ghost, but as we move forward into the modern era, we encounter an even more profound mystery. A world where wealth becomes almost entirely invisible. Imagine yourself sitting in a room filled with humming wires and glowing screens, looking at a world where gold is no longer needed to prove one's fortune. We transition now from the physical coins and paper notes to digital currencies. Arise the era of the great abstraction. This is the story of when wealth transformed into pulses of electricity, bits of code, and light on a screen. It was a revolution that moved money away from the heavy hand of the earth and into the silent, lightning-fast realm of human thought and technology. In this era, the concept of holding something becomes almost metaphorical. As you lie there in the dark, consider how the physical weight of wealth, the coins in a purse or the gold in a vault, begs to fall away in favor of the digital ledger. Wealth was no longer something that sat on a table. It became data. This shift began with the early computers and the electronic transfer of funds, making money move at the speed of thought. You can visualize the silent flow of information through vast networks, billions of transactions happening every second, invisible to the eye, but as real as the ground beneath us. It was an era where we learned that a number on a screen could represent the entire world's labor. As you drift into your thoughts, think about the profound shift in human trust required for this transition. For thousands of years, we trusted our eyes because they saw the metal. Now, we must trust mathematics and silicon. The digital revolution meant that wealth was no longer a physical object to be guarded by soldiers, but an encrypted secret held within vast servers. This was a move toward a pure mathematical reality. You can almost feel the cool, clean hum of a data center in your mind, a vast, silent cathedral where the history of human value is being written in zeros and ones. The speed of this digital world brought with it a new kind of vertigo. In the old days, moving wealth took weeks or months. Now, a keystroke could move a fortune across the globe in an instant. This suddenness created a sense of constant motionness. You can visualize the frantic energy of the first electronic traders, men and women watching screens as numbers flickered like lightning bugs. The pulse of the world's economy became a high-frequency vibration, moving so fast it was almost impossible for the human mind to grasp. It was a leap into an era where wealth could vanish or multiply in the blink of an eye. In the quietness of your room, consider how this abstraction changed our relationship with ownership. When you cannot touch your money, when it is just a number on a device, does it feel less real? This was the beginning of a great psychological experiment. Can we truly value something we cannot grasp? The digital era forced us to face the truth that value is an idea we all agree upon, whether it is carved in stone or stored in a cloud. You are witnessing this silent revolution, the moment where humanity stepped into the realm of pure information. The rise of the first digital banking systems and the internet created a global web of value like nothing seen before. It was a landscape of connectivity. People could trade, invest, and accumulate from anywhere on the planet. You can visualize the vast networks, the glowing lines connecting cities, oceans, and continents, forming a nervous system for human commerce. This era saw the dissolution of borders through the medium of the bit. Wealth was becoming increasingly borderless, flowing around the old constraints of geography as if they were nothing more than dust in the wind. As you breathe steadily, think about the tension between the digital and the physical. While our money moved into the light, we still relied on the machines to keep it alive. The energy required to sustain this invisible wealth became a new kind of resource, the electricity that fuels the servers and the computers. This was a period where the human economy became increasingly dependent on the technological infrastructure we built. You can sense the silent, constant hum of that power, the lifeblood of a world that is becoming more digital with every passing second. There was also a new kind of risk in this era, the invisible thief of the hacker and the glitch. In the old days, you might lose your gold to a highwayman. Now, you could lose it to an error in code or a break in the line. This introduced a new type of anxiety, the fear of the unseen, the struggle to protect something that has no physical form. You can visualize the silent battles fought behind screens, the invisible guards and the clever architects trying to secure the vast vaults of data that now hold our collective survival. The sheer scale of human capital moving through these digital channels is staggering. It allowed for the creation of massive, global-scale wealth management systems where trillions could be moved with a single command. This was an era of immense efficiency, but also of profound complexity. You can almost see the great, silent machines of finance, the algorithms and the servers, working tirelessly to manage the flow of human desire through the medium of light and electricity. As you lie still, consider how this abstraction began to distance us from the physical reality of our labor. When money is a number on a screen, it can feel detached from the sweat of the brow or the grain in the field. The digital era was the ultimate step away from the tactile, forcing us to live in a world where we must trust the invisible structures to provide for our most basic needs. This is an ancient challenge. How do we keep ourselves grounded when our means of survival are so ethereal? In your peaceful rest, reflect on how much human ingenuity was required to make this possible. We had to build entire worlds within machines just to manage the complexity of our own economies. It was a monumental task of mathematics and engineering. You can feel that immense effort, the collective reaching out of humanity toward an invisible horizon, trying to translate its needs into the language of the future. The era of digital finance is a story of human transcendence. We have taken the concept of value and elevated it to the level of pure thought. This is a magnificent achievement, but it is also a humbling one. We are learning that our most precious assets can be as light as air. You are observing this transition in your mind, the movement from the heavy metal to the weightless beam of light. As you move toward a deeper state of rest, let the digital hum soften into the sounds of the natural world. The numbers and the bits are settling. They are becoming part of the quiet background of history. You are leaving behind the fast-paced electricity of the modern era, moving toward the calm, still spaces where thoughts find their own rhythm. The era of the digital rise was a time of incredible expansion and invisible complexity. But as we move forward, we will see how this great speed can lead to its own unique challenges, how moreness can become a weight in itself. You are safe in your quietness, letting the ancient patterns guide you toward a peaceful landing in the wearied realm of dreams. As the digital pulses and silent codes of our modern era begin to settle into a steady hum, we arrive at a moment of profound psychological realization. We have mastered the art of creating wealth from nothing but thought and electricity. We have built empires of light that span the globe in an instant. But as you lie there in the quiet dark, reflecting on these vast, invisible networks, a question begins to rise. Why is it that with all this unprecedented abundance, our hunger remains unquenched? We move now to the hedonic treadmill, the era of the endless chase, and the realization that more often leads to a restless desire for even more. This is the story of how human prosperity became a psychological paradox, where the acquisition of wealth often fails to bring the lasting peace we expected it to hold. In this era of constant growth, we must confront the phenomenon of the moving target. The more we achieve, the higher our baseline for satisfaction seems to rise. Imagine yourself running along a track that is constantly being built in front of you. As you reach a new milestone or acquire a new luxury, it becomes your new normal almost instantly. The thrill of the acquisition fades into the background, leaving only the hunger for the next thing. You can visualize the endless loops of modern life. The pursuit of better houses, faster machines, and more prestige, all while the feeling of enough remains just outness of reach. As you drift deeper into your thoughts, consider how this treadmill is fueled by our own biology and social structures. We are wired to seek to find food, to find safety, to find status. In the ancient world, these needs were finite. Once there was enough grain or a warm hearth, the hunger for survival was temporarily sated. But in an age of infinite digital possibilities, we have accidentally created a landscape where our desires can grow as fast as our wealth. You can almost feel the kinetic energy of that eternal chase, the restless, spinning wheels of human ambition, trying to catch a shadow that always stays one step ahead. In the stillness of your room, reflect on the social comparison that drives this cycle. In an era where we can see the wealth and excessive millions through our screens, we are constantly measuring our own lives against an impossible standard. This is the invisible friction of the modern age, comparing our quiet reality to the loud, polished prosperity of others. You can visualize the heavy weight of expectation, the silent pressure to keep pace, with a global standard that was never designed for the human heart to sustain without fatigue. The history of wealth has always been about survival, but in this era, it has become an arms race of the soul. We find ourselves in a cycle where we work more to buy more, only to realize that the more doesn't necessarily translate into more peace or more joy. This is the great paradox. As our standard of living rises, our sense of contentment often remains stuck in its original place. You can feel this tension, the tug of war between the external expansion of our lives and the internal need for stillness. Think about the concept of lifestyle inflation. As we gain more, our costs rise to meet our new status, keeping us on the treadmill with even greater intensity. This is a cycle that can consume entire generations, as they work harder to maintain a level of comfort that was once considered an unimaginable luxury. You can almost hear the sound of the gears, the constant grinding motion of a society trying to run faster just to stay in the same place relative to its own expectations. In the quietness of your mind, consider how this chase affects our relationship with time. When we are constantly looking toward the next acquisition or the next goal, we often forget to inhabit the present moment. The pursuit of wealth becomes a thief of the now, turning every beautiful second into a mere stepping stone for the future. You can visualize the people of the modern age, rushing through their lives, always glancing forward at the horizon, rarely stopping to feel the ground beneath their feet or the air on their skin. There is also a subtle, exhausting aspect to this eerie, the fatigue of constant choice and the burden of managing our own abundance. Having more options can often lead to more indecision and more anxiety. The sheer volume of things we are expected to manage, to own, and to maintain requires an incredible amount of mental energy. You can sense that wearying rhythm, the constant restless pulse of a world that is constantly being updated, replaced, and upgraded, leaving little room for the quiet satisfaction of permanence. As you breathe steadily, reflect on how our ancestors might have viewed us. They lived in a world of scarcity, where enough was a tangible, reachable goal. We live in a world of manufactured abundance, where the boundaries are much harder to find. This is a profound shift in the human experience, the struggle to define the limit of a need when there is no natural end to it. You can feel that ancient question echoing through time. How much is enough to be truly satisfied? The concept of status seeking is another engine of the treadmill. We use wealth as a signal to others, a way to communicate our place in the social hierarchy. But because status is relative, there is always someone with more, making the peak an elusive mountaintop. You can visualize the endless climbing, the human spirit attempting to scale heights that are constantly being raised by the collective ambitions of everyone else. It is a magnificent but exhausting ascent. In your peaceful rest, consider the cost of this constant movement. The energy spent chasing the horizon often leaves us too tired to enjoy the view we have already attained. This is where the modern soul feels the most friction, in the gap between our outward success and our inward exhaustion. You can almost feel the heavy, breathing fatigue of a civilization that has forgotten how to sit still because it is too busy moving forward. There was also a quieting of the spirit that happened as we became more specialized in our pursuits. The deep, singular focus on getting ahead often pulls us away from the holistic needs of the human being, the need for connection, for contemplation, and for stillness. This is the era where wealth can become an obsession, a singular lens through which we view every aspect of existence. You are witnessing this in the history, the moment when the tool became so large, it began to overshadow the hand that held it. As you move toward a deeper state of sleep, consider if there is a way to step off the treadmill without losing our place in the world. The ancients found ways to balance their needs with their environment. They knew when the harvest was done and when it was time for rest. We are learning to rediscover those old rhythms, to find the boundaries that protect our peace from the infinite hunger of our ambitions. The history of wealth is not just a history of gold or paper, but a history of human desire. The treadmill is a testament to our incredible drive and our restless curiosity. You can feel that energy slowing down now, as if the machines are being turned low for the night. The pursuit is pausing. The running is stopping. The era of the chase was a time of immense growth, but also of great weariness. But as we move forward, we will look at what happens when we stop to examine the cost of all that movement. You are safe in your quietness, letting the ancient patterns guide you toward a single, important realization. Enough is not just a number. It is a state of being. As the frantic motion of the treadmill begins to slow, we arrive at a more somber and introspective reflection. We have seen how the chase for wealth can lead to an endless cycle of desire, but now we must look closer at the cost of carrying that weight over long periods of time. Imagine yourself standing in a silent ancient hall, perhaps a great library or an old stone vault, where the air is heavy with the dust of centuries and the silence is almost tangible. We move now to the cost of accumulation, the era where we witness how the gathering of more can lead to a profound emptying of the self. This is the story of the weight that wealth places upon the human spirit, an exploration of how the act of hoarding, not just material goods, but also status and power, can become a burden too heavy for one soul to bear alone. In this era of reflection, we realize that accumulation is not just about physical objects. It's about the mental space they occupy. When you own much, you must guard it. When you seek much, you must plan for it. And when you hold much, you must fear its loss. You can visualize a person sitting in a magnificent but lonely chamber, surrounded by chests of gold, yet feeling an invisible pressure pressing against their chest. This is the cost. The more we accumulate to ensure our security, the more we become servants to our own possessions. The wealth that was meant to provide freedom often becomes a set of golden chains, binding us to the very things we thought would set us free. As you lie there in your quiet darkness, consider how the accumulation of wealth can lead to a fragmentation of human connection. In the olden days, a person's wealth was often shared or seen as part of a communal pool. But as wealth became more individual and concentrated, it created walls invisible but impenetrable barriers between those who had much and those who had little. You can almost feel the cooling of the air between people, as the pursuit of personal gain occasionally overrides the warmth of human empathy. The cost is often measured in the distance we place between ourselves and our fellow travelers on this earthly road. Think about the psychological weight of the hoard. To accumulate is to constantly manage a complex web of assets, risks, and legacies. This management requires an immense amount of mental energy, leaving less room for the simple joys of existence. You can visualize the weary eyes of an ancient collector, someone who has spent a lifetime gathering treasures, only to realize that their hands are too full to hold anything else, not even the hand of a loved one or the lightness of a breeze. The cost is often the loss of presence. We are so busy managing our wealth that we forget to live within it. In the stillness of your thoughts, reflect on how the drive to accumulate can lead to a profound sense of isolation. Wealth often requires us to protect ourselves from others, creating a defensive posture that can feel like loneliness. We build walls of stone and coffers of iron to keep our treasures safe, but we may also be keeping out the very people who could bring us meaning. You can almost hear the echo in an empty vault, the sound of a life built on something solid, yet feeling hollow because it lacks the breath of human connection. The history of wealth shows that the more one accumulates, the higher the stakes become. The fear of losing what has been gathered becomes a constant, quiet background noise in the soul. This is the cost of the security we seek. As our piles grow, our vulnerability to loss seems to increase. You can sense this ancient anxiety, the tension between the joy of having and the dread of losing. It is a weight that pulls at the spirit, making it difficult to find the lightness necessary for true peace. Consider how accumulation affects our relationship with time itself. When we focus on amassing wealth for the future, we often live in a perpetual state of not yet. We are waiting for the next peak, the next harvest, or the then once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to finally be able to rest. This makes the present moment a mere means to an end. You can visualize a traveler who is so focused on reaching the destination that they forget to look at the flowers along the path. The cost of our future-focused hunger is often the sacrifice of our current joy. As you drift deeper into your slumber, think about how we also accumulate experiences and memories as if they were assets. While this can be a beautiful thing, an obsession with collecting life can sometimes prevent us from truly experiencing it. We might find ourselves trying to curate our lives rather than live them. You can almost feel the heavy texture of a life too full, too many possessions, too many roles, too much history to carry without needing to let some of it go. There was also a social cost, the widening gap between the classes that could lead to the unraveling of the very societies that produced such wealth. When one group accumulates at a rate that outstrides the capacity of the community to sustain itself, tension becomes inevitable. This is an old story, the struggle for the balance between individual prosperity and collective stability. You can visualize the ancient cities where the grandest palaces stood in stark contrast to the humble dwellings of the workers, a visual representation of the cost of inequity. In your peaceful rest, reflect on how we often trade our time, our most precious and limited resource, for wealth that is essentially infinite. We give away hours of our lives for coins, thinking we can use those coins to buy back our time later. But once the hour has passed, it cannot be reclaimed. This is a profound cost, the invisible exchange where we trade the finite for the seemingly endless. You can feel that silent calculation in your mind, the value of a minute versus the weight of a gram of gold. The concept of legacy is also tied to this accumulation. We build great things so that they might outlast us, trying to buy a form of immortality through our possessions. Yet, even the greatest monuments eventually crumble into dust. This realization brings a sense of quiet perspective. The cost of building for eternity is often the struggle to live fully in the moment. You can almost see the ancient statues, weather-worn and silent, reminding us that everything we gather must eventually be surrendered back to the earth. There was also an internal cost, the narrowing of our own perspectives. When our focus is solely on growth and accumulation, we often lose sight of the broader, more beautiful complexities of existence. We begin to see the world through the lens of value or cost, rather than beauty or truth. You can visualize the human spirit being shaped into a narrow vessel, designed only to hold what it has gathered, rather than an open hand that can receive all the wonders of the world. As you move toward a deeper state of rest, consider if there is a way to live with more than we need without losing our essence. The ancients knew how to have enough. They knew when to stop gathering and start being. We are learning again, slowly and sometimes painfully, that the heaviest thing a person can carry is their own surplus. You are observing this in your mind, the slow process of unburdening. The history of accumulation is a mirror held up to our own desires. It shows us the magnificent heights we can reach, but also the depths of loneliness and fatigue that can follow. The weight of the gold is nothing compared to the weight of the soul's need for simplicity. You are leaving behind the heavy coffers now, letting the contents spill softly into the darkness as you prepare to let go. As the night deeps, the echoes of greed and the whispers of loss fade into a soft velvet silence. The vaults are closing, and the ledgers are being put away for the night. You are moving from the heavy burden of having toward the light-filled space of just being. The era of accumulation was a time of great achievement, but also great tension. But as we move forward, we will see how this weight can be transformed into something else entirely, a shift towards finding ourselves in the quietness of enough. You are safe in your quietness, letting the heavy history carry you toward a peaceful landing in the realm of dreams. As the heavy coffers and the weight of vast accumulation begin to recede into the mists of history, we arrive at a moment of profound relief, a breath of fresh air after centuries of breathing in the dust of the vaults. We have seen how the hunger for more can become a burden, but now we turn our gaze toward something lighter, something almost as weightless as a summer breeze. Imagine yourself standing at the edge of a clear mountain lake at dawn, where the water is so still it acts as a perfect mirror to the sky, and the air is crisp with the scent of pine and wet earth. We move now to finding simple sufficiency, the era where we look toward the beauty of having enough. This is the story of the shift from the heavy hand of possession to the gentle heart of contentment, a realization that there is a profound, quiet power in simply being satisfied. In this era of reflection, we begin to understand that enough is not a fixed number on a ledger, but a state of harmony between ourselves and our environment. As you lie there in your peaceful darkness, consider how the concept of sufficiency was once a natural law for much of human history. There was a time when the needs of the body were clear: enough grain to eat, enough wood to burn, enough warmth to sleep. In that reality, finding enough was a visible and achievable goal. This is where we begin to rediscover those ancient rhythms, the wisdom of knowing when our vessel is full and when there is no need for more. As you drift into your thoughts, consider how the pursuit of excess often masks the fear of inadequacy. We gather things because we hope they will make us feel whole, yet a mountain of gold cannot fill an empty spirit. The shift toward sufficiency is a move away from that external validation and toward an internal sense of completeness. You can visualize the difference. One person carrying a heavy, clinking sack of coins, always looking over their shoulder at thieves. Another sitting quietly with just enough for the day, eyes fixed on the rising sun. Both are human, but only one is truly unburdened. The history of sufficiency is the history of finding balance in a world that often pushes us toward extremes. In the ancient cultures we have visited, there was an understanding that to take too much from the land or your neighbor would eventually disrupt the delicate web of life. This was not just about morality. It was about survival and harmony. You could almost feel the quiet wisdom of the ancestors, the people who understood that a surplus was a blessing, but an obsession was a danger. It is a lesson in restraint, a gentle tug on the reins of human ambition. In the stillness of your room, reflect on how our modern struggle often stems from the loss of this concept. Because we live in an era of engineered abundance, we have forgotten where the natural boundaries lie. We are constantly told to expand, yet there is no limit to a horizon. This is why finding enough has become such a radical and necessary act. You can visualize the vast, open plains or the quiet forest places that do not ask for more than they need, but simply exist in their own perfect sufficiency. Think of how much peace is found when we stop fighting against our own needs to satisfy an infinite desire. When a person finds their enough, they find the freedom to move without the heavy weight of constant maintenance. The less you have to protect, the more freely you can roam. The fewer things you need to carry, the more easily you can dance. You can almost feel that lightness now, the sensation of letting go of the surplus, and finding that your hands are suddenly free to hold something far more precious, the present moment. The concept of sufficiency is also a social truth. It is about how we live among others, ensuring that our pursuit of enough does not come at the expense of the community's stability. In many ancient societies, wealth was managed so that there was always a reserve for the collective. This was not greed. It was a communal form of sufficiency. You can visualize the elders sitting in a circle, making sure everyone has their share, ensuring that no one person's hoard outweighs the survival of the tribe. As you breathe steadily, consider how we can apply this to our own lives today. We do not need to live as hermits to find enough. Rather, it is about the internal boundary we set for ourselves. It is a mental discipline, the ability to say, "This is sufficient for my needs and my peace." This is where true wealth resides, in the space between what we have and how much more we think we need. You can feel that widening space expanding within you, creating a quiet sanctuary of calm. In the silence of your mind, contemplate how sufficiency allows us to truly appreciate the beauty around us. When our eyes are always scanning the horizon for the next great find, we miss the intricate detail of the flower or the majesty of the clouds. The person who has enough is able to slow down and actually see the world. You can visualize a simple meal, a bowl of grain, a piecely of fruit, being eaten with a reverence that a feast in a golden hall could never provide. There was also a spiritual dimension to sufficiency in the history of human thought. Many philosophers and sages argued that the greatest wealth was a life lived simply, free from the entanglements of worldly possessions. They taught that by lowering our needs, we increase our freedom to explore the depths of our own souls. This is an ancient truth, that as we simplify our outer world, we expand our inner landscape. You can feel this inward expansion, a quiet opening of the heart to the vastness of being. As you move toward a deeper state of sleep, consider how the shift from more to enough changes our relationship with time. When we are not constantly working for more, we have time to simply exist. We find ourselves no longer running against the clock, but moving in rhythm with it. You can almost hear the slow, steady beat of a heart that is at peace with its own pace, no longer hurried by the frantic demands of an endless accumulation. The history of sufficiency shows us that humans are remarkably resilient when we live within our means. We do not need to be masters of everything. We only need to be able to sustain ourselves and those we love. This realization brings a great sense of relief, as if the heavy packs of our ancestors were being gently placed on the ground beside us. You can feel your own shoulders relaxing, shedding the unnecessary weight of modern expectations. In your peaceful rest, reflect on how this sufficiency is not about poverty, but about clarity. It is not about having nothing. It is about knowing exactly what you have and finding it to be enough. This is the distinction between a life of scarcity and a life of plenty. The person with a little can have an abundance of joy if they recognize their needs are met. You are witnessing this truth in your own quietness, realizing that even as you lie here, you have everything required for this moment of peace. As the night deeps, let the concept of enough become your anchor. It is a steadying force that tells us we do not need to climb forever. Sometimes the most beautiful view is found at the level where we can simply stand and breathe. You are leaving behind the frantic search for more, moving toward the quiet clarity of sufficiency. The history of the world has always been a tension between the vastness of our needs and the reality of our means. But in this moment, you are learning to bridge that gap with contentment. You are safe, you are enough, and you are perfectly poised for rest. As the quiet clarity of sufficiency begins to settle into your very marrow, we arrive at a moment where we look beyond ourselves and toward the timeless voices of those who have walked this path before. We have explored the physical weight of gold, the paper promises of empires, and the internal struggle for enough. Now, we turn our gaze inward to the wisdom that transcends time. Imagine yourself sitting in a vast ancient library where the air is still, and the only sound is the soft turning of pages or the distant chime of a bell. We move now to the philosophy of enough, the era of looking into the eyes of history's wisest minds to find the truth of our own existence. This is not just about economics. It is about the profound wisdom that has guided sages, philosophers, and thinkers as they sought to solve the eternal riddle of human fulfillment. In this space of deep contemplation, we realize that while currencies change and empires crumble, the fundamental questions of the heart remain identical to those asked thousands of years ago. The great thinkers were not merely studying trade or mathematics. They were studying the relationship between the soul and its desires. You can visualize the ancient philosophers in their gardens or the monks in their silent cloisters, men and women who understood that a full treasury could never balance an empty spirit. They taught us that to find peace, one must master the art of letting go, understanding that we are travelers passing through a world of temporary things. As you drift into your thoughts, consider how these ancient voices speak to our modern struggles with such uncanny precision. When they spoke of greed or the illusion of possessions, they were describing the very ghosts we face in our era of digital wealth and endless consumerism. They knew that the mind can be easily tricked into believing that a larger hoard will lead to a lasting peace. Yet their wisdom tells us a different story. You can almost hear the echo of their voices. It is not the man who has much, but the man who needs little, who is truly wealthy. This is an ancient truth that peers through the noise of our current age like a beam of light. Think about how these philosophies provided a blueprint for living within the limits of human nature. They did not suggest we live without any means. Rather, they taught us to view wealth as a tool rather than a master. The wise knew that if you hold your possessions too tightly, they will eventually crush you. But if you hold them with an open hand, you can move through life with grace. You can visualize the difference. The person gripping their gold so hard their knuckles are white versus the one who holds it as lightly as a feather, ready to let it go when the time comes. In the stillness of your room, reflect on how these ideas serve as an antidote to our modern restlessness. In a world that tells us to always want more, the philosophy of enough is a radical act of rebellion, a way to reclaim our own peace from the hands of a hungry economy. This was not a passive existence for the sages. It was an active discipline. It required the strength to resist the siren song of excess and the courage to live a life that is measured by character rather than capital. You are witnessing this ancient, quiet bravery, the struggle to remain grounded in a world that wants us to fly too far from ourselves. Consider how these philosophical traditions have shaped the very concept of virtue and wealth. To many, true prosperity was seen as a combination of wisdom, integrity, and a simple life. This was not about being without. It's about having enough to be useful to others while remaining free from the chains of attachment. You can almost see the ancient scholars in their libraries. They did not seek to own the books, but to let the wisdom within them inhabit their souls. They understood that the true goal was the expansion of the mind and the peace of the spirit. As you breathe steadily, think about how we often confuse our identity with our net worth. The ancient philosophers warned us against this great illusion, the idea that we are what we possess. When we lose our wealth, do we lose ourselves? Their answer was a resounding no. They taught that the core of our being is something far more permanent than any metal or paper. You can feel that distinction now. There is the part of you that interacts with the world of things, and there is the eternal, silent observer within that remains untouched by the fluctuations of fortune. The history of thought has always been a dialogue between the desire for more and the necessity of enough. This tension is what drives us to build great things, yet it is also what makes our lives so difficult if left unmanaged. You can visualize the scales of justice. On one side, the ambition that moves humanity forward. On the other side, the wisdom that keeps us human. The goal was never to destroy the scale, but to find the perfect equilibrium where growth and peace could coexist. In your peaceful rest, reflect on how these ancient truths provide a sense of permanence in a world of constant change. We have seen empires rise and fall. We have seen currencies become paper and then nothing at all. Yet the wisdom remains. This is why we study them, to find the stable ground that exists beneath the shifting sands of history. You can feel that stability growing within you, a sense that even if everything around us changes, there is a core truth to be held on to. There was also an emphasis on moderation as a path to greatness. The ancients believed that excess in any direction, even the pursuit of virtue itself, could lead to imbalance. To live well was to walk the middle path, avoiding the extremes of asceticism and indulgence. This is where we find the perfect balance for human life, having enough to be comfortable, but not so much that we lose our connection to reality. You can visualize a person walking a narrow mountain path. They move with purpose, but they do not try to carry more than their strength allows. In the quietness of your mind, consider how this philosophy invites us to look at our own lives through an ancient lens. We are often too busy being successful to be wise, but wisdom's what gives success its meaning. Without it, we are merely successful collectors of things. You can almost see the light from a philosopher's lamp, casting a soft glow on the truth that a life well lived is measured by the depth of our peace and the clarity of our vision. The history of human thought is a testament to the fact that we are more than just consumers or workers. We are seekers of meaning. The pursuit of wealth was always meant to be a means to an end, not the end itself. When it becomes the goal, we lose our way. You can feel this ancient warning. The gold should serve the person, but the person must never become a servant to the gold. As you move toward a deeper state of sleep, consider that wisdom is something we can cultivate in the quiet moments like these. It does not require great wealth. It requires great attention. We are learning from those who walked before us, the ones who knew how to find an entire universe within the simple reality of their own breath. The voices of the philosophers are fading now into a soft, velvet silence. They have given us their maps. We must now walk the paths they described. You are leaving behind the complex debates and the heavy books, moving toward the silent truth that lies at the heart of all great wisdom. In your peaceful rest, realize that you do not need to solve the mysteries of the universe tonight. You only need to exist in this moment of quietude. The history of thought is vast, but for now, it is just a gentle whisper, leading you toward a tranquil and wise sleep. As the ancient voices of wisdom begin to settle into a soft, rhythmic hum, we arrive at the final station of our journey, the place where all paths meet and every heavy burden is finally laid down. We have traversed the vast distances of history, from the first clink of metal to the digital pulses of light, from the hunger of empires to the quiet realization of enough. Now we stand at the threshold of the final truth. Imagine yourself standing on a shore where the ocean meets the sky, a place where there is no longer any distinction between the earth and the heavens, only a vast, infinite expanse of peace. This is the final letting go, the ultimate resolution in our story of why we stopped loving money. It is the moment when the human spirit realizes that while wealth can be gathered, it cannot be kept. It can be held, but it must eventually be released to find true freedom. In this final hour of reflection, we look back at the entire arc of our history and see a profound pattern. We have been travelers who often mistook the vehicle for the destination. We thought that by accumulating more, we were moving closer to happiness, not realizing that the weight was actually slowing us down. You can visualize the long line of seekers from every era, the merchants, the kings, the philosophers, and the laborers, all arriving at the same realization. They all eventually learned that the most precious things in life are those that cannot be taxed, traded, or stored in a vault. The history of money is, ultimately, the story of learning how to let it go. As you lie there in your peaceful darkness, consider what happens when we stop loving the concept of more and start embracing the reality of now. This is not an act of giving up. It is an act of liberation. When we stop making our happiness dependent on the next coin or the next acquisition, we become invincible. You can almost feel the tension leaving your body as you realize that you do not need to carry a mountain of gold to be worthy of this moment of peace. The history of wealth was a long and arduous road, but every step was leading us toward this very realization, that the greatest wealth is the freedom from the need for more. Think about the finality of the human life, how we enter this world with nothing and leave it with nothing. This is the ultimate truth that eludes the greedy but embraces the wise. The money we gathered, the empires we built, and the luxuries we crowd are all left behind in the dust of history. We are brought back to ourselves, stripped of our titles and our treasures, until only our essence remains. You can visualize the great unfolding. As we shed the layers of material wealth, we find that we are not becoming less, but more present, more clear, and more truly alive. In the stillness of your thoughts, reflect on how loving money was often just a masked version of our search for security and meaning. We wanted money to feel safe. We wanted it to provide a sense of purpose. But we found that the more we loved it, the more it controlled us, turning our search for peace into a frantic race. This is why we stopped loving it, not because we lost interest in comfort, but because we discovered that true security comes from within, and true meaning comes from something far beyond the physical world. You can feel this truth settling like a gentle mist over your mind. Consider the beautiful paradox of the human condition. To live well, we need enough to sustain us, but to be free, we must not love our possessions too much. It is a delicate, lifelong dance between the hand that takes and the hand that gives. This was the lesson the ancients were trying to teach through their philosophies. You can visualize the hands of history, one hand reaching out to gather and another slowly opening to release. The most beautiful lives are lived in the balance between these two movements. As you drift deeper into your slumber, think about how this letting go is not a single event, but a continuous process. We must let go of our yesterday's wealth and our tomorrow's ambitions every single day to remain truly present. This was the secret that the most content people throughout history understood. They lived in a state of constant, gentle release. You can almost feel that rhythmic breathing, the inhalation of life, and the exhalation of letting go as a perfect cycle of being. In the quietness of your mind, contemplate the idea that we do not actually own anything. We are merely temporary stewards of it. The land was here before us, and it will be here after us. The gold is just borrowed from the earth for a little while. This perspective changes everything. When you realize you are just a guest in the world of things, you can enjoy them without becoming enslaved by them. You can feel that lightness now, the sense of being a traveler who carries nothing but their own soul as they walk through a beautiful, temporary landscape. There was also the realization that we must love life more than we love our means to live it. When money becomes the end-all and end-nothing, we lose the texture of the world, the colors, the sounds, and the connections that make life worth living. We stop seeing a forest as an ancient wonder and start seeing it as board feet. We stop seeing a stranger as a soul and start seeing them as a consumer. The history of our greed was often the shrinking of our world. You can visualize your own world expanding right now, growing larger and more vibrant as you let go of the narrow focus of acquisition. As you breathe steadily, reflect on how this final letting go is an act of trust. It is trusting that we will be okay without the excess. It is trusting that the universe provides enough for our needs if we are willing to live within its rhythms. This is the ultimate courage, the willingness to step into the unknown with only ourselves and our character to sustain us. You can feel this ancient, quiet bravery rising up in your spirit, the strength of a soul that knows it is enough. In your peaceful rest, consider how the end of our journey was always meant to be a return to simplicity. We traveled far around the world to find the wisdom that was already within us. The money was just a tool for the journey. It was never meant to be the destination. You could almost see the path winding back from the great cities and the vast empires, leading through the quiet fields and the silent forests, back to the place where everything began, the simple, pure essence of being. The history we have walked together is a testament to human hunger, but it is also a testament to human wisdom. We have seen that while wealth can build civilizations, it is the soul's peace that sustains the spirit. You are witnessing the merging of these two truths, that we live in a world of plenty, yet our greatest joy is found in the simplicity of enough. You can feel this profound alignment happening within your own being as you prepare for the most important transition of all. As you move toward a deeper state of sleep, let the weight of every coin, every paper note, and every digital digit fall away from you. They are falling into the deep well of history, leaving you unburdened and light. You are not your possessions. You are the awareness that experiences them. This is the great truth that releases us from the struggle. You can visualize yourself floating on a sea of tranquility, where nothing can weigh you down because you have finally learned to let it go. In the stillness of the night, there is no more need for more. There is only the present moment, and in this moment, you are perfectly provided for. The history of human desire has led us here, to the edge of silence where nothing needs to be earned, because everything already is. You are leaving behind the hunger for gold and the fear of loss, moving into a place that is eternally full. The great cycle is complete. The gold has become light. The paper has become air. The empires have become stars. You are safe in your quietness, letting the history of our lives carry you toward a final, peaceful landing in the realm of absolute rest. The journey is over, and the silence is sweet. The coins have settled into their resting places, and the great machines have slowed to a quiet hum. You are no longer the collector or the seeker. You are simply the soul at rest. As you drift into the finality of this peaceful sleep, remember that you are enough, and you have always been enough. Let go of all else, for you are home. The end. Sweet dreams.